You know, it's 50 something degrees out here right now. It's really quite tolerable. It's a bright sunny afternoon on a day at the very, very end of December. It's a very hot winter. It's weird. I guess what I mean to say is that this has been a weird year. Russia invaded Ukraine, Israel invaded Gaza, North Korea invaded Sony's email accounts, and things got a bit crazy. 2014 was a stupefying, depressing, sometimes hilarious, and often ridiculous year for video games. This was a year where Facebook bought Oculus, where Dungeon Keeper was revived as cell phone shovelware, where a Souls game was one of the least memorable releases, and even Tetris managed to launch with a myriad of technical issues. This year, YouTubers were bribed by a shady PR company to give dishonestly positive coverage to a good game. Platinum made a bad game, Jack Thompson made an appearance, and, as usual, the most egregious example of things not working the way you'd expect them to was the experience of having the most rewarding, polished, content-rich, and slickest game releases come from tightly budgeted indie developers who were selling something cheap. Those were my favorite games this year, and they are why I think 2014 actually had a greater number of good games come out than last year. We didn't have that trinity of AAA chart toppers, BioShock Infinite, GTA 5, and The Last of Us, even though those same games were still coming out this year as re-releases or DLC. And although a lot of the most anticipated big releases got pushed back to 2015, a hell of a lot of excellent games still came out, and that's what matters. You just had to look harder for them this time, especially after Steam unleashed the floodgates around spring and dropped their bar for entry far lower than wherever it was at before. So in the coming years, please, please, please do not forget games like Banished, Wargame Red Dragon, Transistor, Revolver 360, Door Kickers, One Finger Death Punch, and Wasteland 2. You won't find a lot of those games topping or even appearing on many top 10 of 2014 lists, but they were still, in my opinion, some of the best games of this year. But what about the worst game? I got lucky, because I actually had to dig for it this time. Last year's pick was easy. It was an overambitious, barely working blunder, X Rebirth. The most infamous releases this year were AAA sandboxes known for their technical faults, thanks to them having too much hype and not enough development time. Of the biggest, most expensive games I played this year, I generally enjoyed Far Cry 4. I thought Watch Dogs was at least okay, and at least 10% of the time I spent with the crew was interesting. The only game I played this year that I thoroughly did not enjoy from beginning to end was Sir, You Are Being Hunted, which hurts. It was a crowd-funded effort by a games writer I like, who cobbled together 15 people, and they all delivered most of what was promised, timely enough. But those concessions don't excuse the game's predictably generated maps from being a muddy expanse of doldrums that barely made use of any button besides W, at least when you weren't engaged in stilted, sticky combat laced with shallow survival and stealth mechanics against indomitable AIs. The simple truth is that of all the games I did play, Sir is simply the one that agreed with me the least. That game grinded sorely against the themes shared by some of my favorite games of this year. Games that espoused popcorn thrills, ridiculous and hilarious set pieces, and fast, kinetic action. Games that were lighthearted and colorful, games that embraced the historically shameless campiness of video games themselves. 2013 was a year of mechanically light games that made strides towards emotional, self-aware storytelling. The critical successes of games like, say, Gone Home created a comment section backlash against games like Gone Home. And so, in 2014, games got mechanically heavy. The emotional, hard-hitting indie darling this time was This War of Mine, a deeply interactive survival game that did not stray far from traditional survival mechanics, rather choosing to recontextualize them. In 2013, games were trying to get serious. In 2014, games got silly. We blasted Nazi death robots on the moon in Wolfenstein: The New Order. We sliced up angelic monsters swooping onto low-flying fighter jets in Bayonetta 2. We slapped action figures together in Smash 4. We hilariously referenced pop culture and jazz punk. We flung a brain-dead goat ragdoll around in Goat Simulator and then flung a brain-dead bread ragdoll around in I Am Bread. All these games exhibited a carefree sense of spectacle. They didn't take themselves seriously and did not expect to be taken seriously.
2014 also saw my first console purchase in 8 years. I bought a Wii U, the one current console offering enough tempting exclusives that I don't expect to eventually come out on PC. It's a console with a controller that gives me hand cramps. It took 2 hours to set up, and it always wants to stop what it's doing to update. Very, very slowly. It has a stilted online experience, blockaded by loading screens and minimalist menus, but it has games that are the most fun games I've played in years. Colorful, joyous, emotive games about filling your living room with friends and laughter, bright, cheerful, E-rated, family-friendly games, and one very immature, mature-rated game. Those were the games of 2014. They were childish, but not in a bad way. They were childish in a nostalgic way. They evoked the feeling of playing games as a kid, of seeing how many hilarious, adventurous, or mischievous situations games can let us explore. So, with those thematic considerations in mind, the one game that I feel represented 2014 best was Game of the Year 420 Blaze It. Actually, that wasn't my favorite, nor what I think was the best game that came out this year, just the most representative. So really, the most enjoyable game I played this year was the PC port of Metal Gear Rising. But that was a game from last year.
The best game of 2014, the one new release that I thought excelled in game design, and audio design, and mechanical and level design, was Shovel Knight.
That was a game that doesn't just evoke what I thought this year was all about. It's also one of the most finely crafted side-scrollers I've ever played in my life. It's proof that 8-bit game design is timeless. It's a highly concentrated example of everything that has come and gone in the last 20 years of video games. It is an amalgamation of smart trends borrowed from Super Mario Bros. All the way to Dark Souls. Every block is placed deliberately, even the color choices, the pixel density, the synthesizers used for the music were all carefully chosen to represent the most cherished video games. If you like video games, you will probably like Shovel Knight. If you are introducing someone to video games, start them off with Shovel Knight. It's not just a great game by itself, it is quintessential video gaming. It is a game about why we love games. But sadly, 2014 was a year where that love was tarnished in a great many ways. The most expensive of which was a brief series of mega-corporate mergers. Facebook bought Oculus. No one expected that, and no one's likely to know what the hell to make of it for a while. Disney bought Maker Studios, which so far just means I'm technically paid by Disney now. No other changes yet, and I'd prefer it stayed that way. In August, Amazon bought Twitch. Yet another move that slides the games media market a bit further towards a more consolidated, smaller, and less competitive business. Which is visibly happening, thanks to the closures and upcoming closures of Computer and Video Games Magazine, Official Nintendo Magazine, the American version of the official Xbox Magazine, the GameSpy website, and the YouTube channel Rev3 Gaming. While Rev3 was closing up shop, 7 of GameSpot's most recognizable names were laid off. Presumably as the audience for games media is shifting their preferences from written content to video. This year, I became a fan of Danny O'Dwyer's stuff at GameSpot. I really like what he's doing with the videos over there, but I'm not a fan of the loss of jobs, livelihoods, and the simple notion of there being less content to consume on the internet. Which is a state of affairs that might suit a certain portion of fans just fine. The Gamergate hashtag is something that a lot of folks apparently don't want people to talk about. The incredibly complicated internet drama that was Gamergate cannot be quickly summed up. It has a lot to do with the Streisand effect that comes with deleting comments and threads. It has to do with shocking and oftentimes dubious claims of internal games journalism corruption. It also has to do with the moral panic exhibited by gamers who felt they were being attacked by articles criticizing gamer stereotypes. It didn't help that the timing of this campaign coincided with Australian Target's decision to remove GTA 5 from shelves, or Steam's decision to remove Hatred from Greenlight for one day. This was a year of video games that embraced silly spectacles, and here were those qualities reflecting in real life. The second half of 2014 was a bombastic episode of obscure online culture slipping into the mainstream.
Do you understand how important it is? We are talking about ethics in gamer journalism. Do you understand how huge that is?
While Gamergate was getting skewered by the media, its enemies were gaining popularity. Comment sections in general are probably going to look more negative than ever for a while now. The polarization, the hyperbolic language, and the sheer longevity of this hashtag has spread infighting and fear in the gaming community. And all of it is going to look bad on all of us in the long term, no matter where you stand. Everyone seems utterly convinced of the evils of everyone else, which means that for anyone getting wrapped up in this stuff, the greatest threats to gaming are gonna look like its own fans, even though I've been having a hard time of understanding what's supposed to be at stake in the first place. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, and no one wants to believe that they're the bad guys. If you honestly felt judged, hated, and attacked by these articles, if you took it personally, then I encourage you to think about where that vulnerability comes from, and how you can replace it with security.
If you are watching this video, if you are understanding the words that are coming out of my mouth, then you are a human being. You are so much more than just the games that you play. You have an entire lifetime of rich human experiences that define who you are. Those games are not what's enriching your life. You are. You have the imagination, the power, and the love to create the happiness that these games fill you with. Don't let anyone bring you down for who you are, and don't let anyone exploit you for who you are. Don't let anyone sell your own identity back to you. You don't need an excuse to like video games. That's just who you are. Have confidence in that. You don't need to risk your reputation and your privacy getting involved with these shady online operations and wars over what people can and cannot say on the internet. You don't need to fill your life with so much negativity just to express how much you love something. These are video games after all, and I just can't help but think throughout this whole mess that the video game market is freer than it has ever been in its entire history. We have a bright and vibrant and diverse selection of wildly different games to buy and different ways to buy them. It's just, no matter how shitty the year gets, no matter how stupefying, shocking, ridiculous, or hilarious the year gets, there will still be a niche for good video games.